One other little side note I probably should have mentioned a long time ago. There's other ways to define functions. So we've defined functions before like this function, my thing, and whenever I do that, we're gonna return a random number. So what if I say console.log my thing gives me a random number. I run it again, a different random number. So that's one way to define a function. I could say square, and I could say return, and I put in a number, and I could say return math.pal a comma 2. It'll return the square. So I'm going to say, what is the square of 9? 81. What is the square of 81? 65, 61. What is the square of 3? 9. So I've defined a function. Function, the name, arguments. What does it do? That's how you do that. Well, there's another way to do that. I'm going to comment that out so we don't have to worry about that. What can I do that's equivalent to that? Well, I could say let square equal a generic function. So I could say it's a function, it takes a variable a, and on the output side, we're going to say math.pal a comma 2. Oops, return. So instead of saying function square, and that does it, I'm saying let square equal a function, and it pretty much does the same thing. 9, 5, I get 25, 25, I get 625. So this is another way to define a function. You do it just like you would a variable, but instead of setting it equal to something, you set it equal to what's called a generic function, a nameless function. So I'm declaring the name, and I'm setting it equal to a function that I don't give a name to here, like I did up here on line 1. So that's another way to define a function. It's okay, both are fine. Here's yet another way to do that, and this may be the best way. I kind of like it. So we're going to say let square, just like we did before, but here's a new way to do kind of like a generic function. They're called arrow functions. So there's an input, and that turns into an output. So whatever goes in here, like a, it's going to transform into a times a. I could do that. Return a times a. Well, I could do math.pal a comma 2. So return that. And I can press enter, just like I could do it on its own line like we did before. That's fine. But then I get 625. What's the square of 11? 121. What's the square of 12? 144. That works too. But this one's pretty nice. I kind of like that one. So there's there's 3 ways that I know of to define a function in JavaScript. You could just say function and that, like I have been doing so far in these videos. There's this other way, using what is referred to as a generic function, because the name, it doesn't have a name here. And then there is a way to use an arrow function. I think the arrow function is the newest way and probably the best. So I hope that makes sense. So you might see me define a function in any of these ways, but it's no different than defining it this way for the most part.